Welcome everyone to the 35th consecutive monthly meeting of the Upper West Side. Oh, now we're the New York City Neighborhood Naturalists. My name is Lydia Paradiso. I'm a graduate fellow at the New York Botanical Garden and the Community Graduate Center, and I've been working with the New York City EcoFlora project since January. Neighborhood naturalists monitor and advocate for biodiversity in their communities. They document plants, animals, fungi, microorganisms, and ecological processes using scientific methods that are free, open source, and archival. Neighborhood naturalists help educate and inform their neighbors about biodiversity, and they communicate biodiversity concerns to local governments. We gather on the third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Meetings are free and open to the public. Our speakers study, document, and conserve biodiversity and advocate for environmental justice and sanity in New York City and beyond. Neighborhood naturalists are encouraged to attend community board meetings, especially parks and environmental committees of their local community district. Since November 2018, the neighborhood naturalists have regularly attended Community Board 7 Parks and Environment Committee meetings, providing informed testimony regarding the impacts of specific projects on biodiversity and ecosystem health. We have successfully advocated for the use of bird-safe glass in the design of the 79th Street Rotunda renovation in Riverside Park, as well as advocate for the increased use of native plants in New York City Parks landscape designs. We have also informed board members on the harmful effects of light pollution. All New York City nature lovers are encouraged to join the New York City EcoFlora project on iNaturalist as community scientists to observe, collect, and compile information about the city's plants and their relationships with other organisms, such as birds, insects, and fungi. Since 2017, over 22,000 New Yorkers have documented over 10,000 species through nearly 370,000 observations. And I'll link that in a second so that you guys can check that out if you would like. So it is my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Doug Tallamy. Doug is a professor at University of Delaware, where he has authored 105 research publications and has taught for 41 years. Chief among his research goals is to better understand the many ways that insects interact with plants and how such interactions determine the diversity of animal communities. His book, Bringing Nature Home, was published by Timber Press in 2007 and was awarded the 2008 Silver Medal by the Garden Writers Association. The Living Landscape, a book co-authored with Rick Darke, was published in 2014. Nature's Best Hope, a New York Times bestseller, was released in February 2020, and his latest book, The Nature of Oaks, was released by Timber Press in March 2021. Doug is an honorary director of Wild Ones, and has won the Garden Club of America Margaret Douglas Medal for Conservation, the Tom Dodd Jr. Award of Excellence, and the 2018 AHS B.Y. Morrison Communication Award. Doug's talk tonight will focus on oak trees. Oaks are a superior landscape tree throughout most of the US due to their many ecological and aesthetic attributes. Using activity on the oaks in his yard each month of the year as examples, Doug will compare oak species to other popular shade trees in terms of their ability to support animal diversity, protect watersheds, and sequester carbon dioxide. Learning that oaks provide life support to thousands of species may motivate us to return more of these essential trees that built our landscapes, or to our built landscapes. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat or hold them until the end of the presentation. And at that point, we'll go through anything that's in the chat, and then anyone who has anything additional that they want to ask may do so. And as a reminder, there is no community board meeting planned for tonight. So with that, I turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Lydia. I do want to talk about the nature that I have found on the oaks in my yard. But I want to start with what our yard looked like when we moved in the year 2000. It was part of a farm that was broken up into 10-acre lots, and it had been mowed for hay before we moved in. So there essentially were very, very few plants there. And our goal was to restore the eastern deciduous ecosystem. And we had to start from scratch, but down the street, maybe a mile, there were a couple of white oaks that shed acorns that first year that we moved in. So I got a few of those acorns, planted them. This is what white oak acorns do in the fall. They put down their root, their radicle. They don't put up any leaves until the following spring. And when they do, this is what they look like. And they put them up and then they stay that way. They add very few leaves that first year, and it gives people the idea that oaks grow really slowly. But in fact, there's my white oak right there. It's growing underground. That first year, they grow 10 times more root biomass than leaf biomass. So they're laying down a large root system that will serve them well the rest of their life. I've got a little deer cage around here because, of course, deer love those oaks. But 18 years after I planted that, this is what the oak looked like. It was 45 feet tall, 47-inch circumference, a canopy spread of 30 feet. It's still a baby, of course, but it's a real tree. In terms of a landscape tree, it's a wonderful size. So one of my points tonight is that oaks are lifelines to countless numbers of creatures. There are dozens of bird species that depend on the insects and acorns made by oaks, lots of rodents, even the big guys, bears, raccoons, possums, a few reptiles like rat snakes and fence lizards depend on oaks. There are several butterflies, but hundreds of species of moths specialize on oaks, as well as their predators and parasitoids. There are a lot of synipid gall wasps, many beetles, there are weevils and spiders, and dozens more species of arthropods and mollusks and annelids that depend on oak leaf litter. This diverse web of life, though, is typically unnoticed and therefore unappreciated, certainly underappreciated by people who have oaks in their landscapes. And that is why I wrote this book. It is a month-by-month guide to the life that is on your oaks. And of course, the goal is to provide people with the knowledge that will generate interest. And once you have interest, it typically generates compassion. And we need a lot more compassion towards nature these days. So that was the goal. I didn't know if it would work or not, and we'll still see how well the book does. But first, a few facts about the genus Quercus. It contains 91 species in North America, 435 species globally. The word Quercus comes from the Celtic quer, meaning fine, and ques, meaning tree. So oaks are fine trees, and they are indeed fine trees. There are 4 major taxonomic sections in the genus that are common in North America. There's the Quercus group, the white oak group, the Lobate group, the red oak group, and then those are the 2 major groups up here in the Northeast. The Verentes group, the live oak group, much more of a southern group, and the Protobalanus group, a canyon oak group, which is, it's not a very big group out in the West. This is the distribution of oaks, and the brown is where you have 0 species of oaks naturally occurring. So every place else, we've got at least 1 species of oak. The biggest diversity is in the Southeast, although there are a number of species of oaks in California as well. So, when you add all that up, there are oaks in most of the major ecosystems of North America. They have a very long life history, 900-year life cycle, believe it or not, when the oaks are undisturbed, 300 years of growth, 300 years of stasis, and then 300 years of decline. And during each one of those growth periods, they're delivering unique ecological contributions to their local ecosystem. Everybody asks, what's the largest and oldest oak in the US? It's probably the Middleton oak. It's a southern live oak. It's 1,500 years old. That's the estimate. And I believe it's in Charleston. This was the Y oak in Y, Delaware, or Maryland, Y, Maryland. It fell over. I got to see it before it fell over, but it's a big tree. It was a big tree, the largest white oak in the country. And of course, this is everybody's idea of what oaks do. They just get, enormous. And it also gives people an excuse not to plant them because they don't want an enormous tree like that in their yard. Well, not all species do get enormous. And we'll talk about some of the small ones in a little bit. What I do want to focus on tonight is the ecological functions that oaks will bring to your landscape. They have the highest biodiversity value, and I'll explain that in a second. They're sequestering more carbon dioxide than almost any other plant. They are the best soil stabilizers because of their enormous root systems. They make the best leaf litter because the leaf litter lasts the longest. And all of that promotes healthier watersheds. Now, I started the book in October. You say, why'd you start in October? Because that's when I decided to start. I just had this idea, let's write a book about oaks, and it happened to be October, no rhyme or reason to it. And I looked out the window, and there's my oak there. That's what it looked like. And October, of course, is the month that the acorns have been produced. Most of them have fallen at that point, so they're very, very noticeable. A single oak can produce up to 3 million acorns in its lifetime. And that's a tremendous food source for an awful lot of animals, like all of those rodents that eat oaks, acorns. The big guys, the black bears, depend on them. And of course, the squirrels that we know about, and those cute little deer, they love acorns as well. A lot of birds depend on them. Turkeys really rely on oaks in the fall, on acorns. Red-bellied woodpeckers, titmice, towhees, who knew? Nuthatches, flickers, many ducks eat a lot of acorns, particularly wood ducks. They really favor them. Any oak branch that's overhanging a lake or a stream, the acorns drop into the water and the ducks dive for them, and they'll come out on the land and eat them as well. Then there are a number of invertebrates that are depending on acorns. This is the acorn weevil. That's the acorn weevil larva tunneling out of an acorn. That's what it looks like as an adult. Then there's a group of moths called the acorn moths, several species that are very difficult to distinguish in the genus Blastobastis, but they're depending on acorns as well. So at a few weeks after the acorns have dropped, this is what it looks like under an oak tree. Virtually all of the acorns are destroyed. So you might wonder, how do oaks ever actually successfully reproduce? And this is where jays come in. There's actually an ancient mutualism between jays all over the world and oak trees. They both evolved in Southeast Asia 65 million years ago. So they developed this relationship very early on. And of course, oaks are giving jays food that they store for the wintertime, and jays are allowing oaks to move farther and faster, to disperse farther and faster than any other tree genus in the world. And this is how it works. Jays store acorns for winter food. They'll take an acorn. They don't cache them in a group. They will bury them singly. They can carry more than one acorn at a time, but they will bury them singly. So they pick it up, but then they'll fly up to a mile from the parent tree. And that's the key. There is no other organism that's eating acorns that disperse them that far. They will then tap it below the surface of the soil. Now, if they think another jay has seen them do that, they'll wait a few minutes and then they'll pick up their acorn and move to a new spot, because they're a jay. They know that jays steal acorns. Then, of course, during the winter, the object is to go back and find all those acorns they have buried and have something to eat. Well, a single jay can bury up to 4,500 acorns each fall, particularly during a mast year. But they only recover 1 out of every 4 acorns. They just don't remember where they all are, which means a single jay can plant 3,360 oak trees each year. And that is how they move around so far. It's not just blue jays. Certainly the western jays. This is a scrub jay in Oregon doing exactly the same thing. Okay, November, you might stop and think and say, well, I didn't see a lot of acorns this year. And last year I saw a whole bunch. And what you're thinking about is the condition called masting. Some years the oaks make a tremendous number of acorns. Other years they make hardly any. Well, of course, ecologists want to explain what's happening in nature, and they always come up with hypotheses. Sometimes they test them. A lot of times they don't test them. But these are the 4 major hypotheses trying to explain why oaks mast. Masting is an unusual condition in deciduous trees. Predator satiation, predator reduction, improved pollination, and energy partitioning. Let's look at each one of those. Predator satiation. The object is to make more food than the predators that each you can consume. So there are a lot of things that eat acorns. We call them acorn predators. Here's the acorn weevil. They can get quite numerous. You can have 90% of the acorns occupied by an acorn weevil. And if oaks made a constant number of acorns every single year, then the things that eat acorns would stabilize their population around that number and probably eat just about all of them. But if oaks vary the number of acorns, then when they produce a whole bunch, they produce more than the predators can actually eat. That's predator satiation. It also allows them to reduce predator populations. So when you have a mast year, populations of squirrels and other things that depend on acorns, white-footed mice, things like that, explode. They really do well. And then if the next year there's very few acorns, those populations crash. And you usually have 2 or 3 years of very few acorns. So the populations dip way below their peak. Then you have a mast year, and it's easy to swamp the predator population because you have already knocked it down by having a few years without many acorns. Improved pollination. Oaks are wind pollinated. So if you have a synchronization and the production of an awful lot of pollen in one year, it's much easier to get your female flowers pollinated. And then finally, energy allocation. There rarely is enough energy for oaks to grow and produce acorns in the same year. So they tend to allocate it to one or the other. Some years they'll make a lot of acorns and grow very little. Other years they'll grow quite a bit and make very few acorns. Rarely do they do both at the same time. And by the way, this is a scarlet oak. So if you're wondering whether oaks can have good fall color, they can. Okay, December. Here's another feature about oaks that you probably have noticed, particularly in the white oak group, and particularly in young trees or the lower branches of trees. And that is a condition called marcescence, where the leaves are retained on the trees. Oaks are deciduous trees, but they don't drop their leaves in the fall like most other deciduous trees. That is called marcescence. And again, we have to ask why. Why are oaks retaining their leaves when everybody else drops them? Almost everybody else drops them. Beeches, which are related to oaks, by the way, also have some level of marcescence. And the leading hypothesis is that not that long ago, some 9,000–10,000 years ago, at least the temperate zones of the world were loaded with huge Pleistocene mammals. This is a group of mammals. This picture is a group of mammals that were found in Mexico alone. So 3 species of mammoths, the giant sloth that could reach up 18 feet, many types of browsers. And remember what a browser is. That's what the white-tailed deer does. It browses. It's eating the buds, the meristematic tissue that will come out in the spring, and they eat them all winter long, as opposed to eating grass and things on the ground. So if oaks retain their leaves from the previous season around those buds, you've got dead, nutritionless leaves surrounding those important buds. It gives you a mouthful of something that's not very, very tasty. So the hypothesis is that it's simply a mechanism to protect the food that these big mammals like to browse on. It also is difficult to eat an oak bud that is surrounded by marcescent leaves without making a lot of noise. Those dead leaves rustle, and of course you've got a lot of predators that were after those mammals, and you wanted to eat a little bit more quietly than that. So another feature that supports that hypothesis is where the marcescent leaves are distributed. They go up about 18 feet, which was the reach of that giant sloth. And then beyond that, there are no marcescent leaves. Why retain your leaves up there if nothing's trying to eat the buds? So all of this really does suggest that it's a feature that would protect oaks from mammal browsing. It also provides oaks with a landscape attribute that most other deciduous trees don't have, and that is they can be screens during the wintertime. So here you have a deciduous tree that can screen out your neighbor even during the wintertime. And if you want to screen out your neighbor, that's a good thing. Okay, January, it's cold, not much happening out there. Most people are not outside looking at what might be happening. But if you do go outside and you stare up in the trees, you don't see much. It looks dead, not things happening. But if you stare really hard, a lot of times you can see birds that look like they're foraging in the tree. And they're often tiny birds, things like the golden crowned kinglet or our chickadees or our titmice. They're all up there in the branches hopping around. Looks like they're eating something. Well, of course, entomologists know there are no insects out in the wintertime. So we're wrong. Entomologists are wrong. Bern Heinrich, who is also an entomologist, wondered about that. Why are the birds up there foraging in the trees? So he looked inside the crops of golden crowned kinglets in January in Maine and found that they were full of caterpillars. And what they were doing is foraging for caterpillars that are up in the canopy all winter long, sitting there looking like sticks. And they really do look like sticks, which is why we don't see them. When it gets cold, there are antifreeze proteins in their cells that keep those cells from bursting. That's a caterpillar right there, by the way. And they simply sit there all winter long. When it's really cold, they shrink a little bit. When it gets a little bit warmer, they swell a little bit, but they are not doing anything. So you might wonder, what are they doing up there? Why be a caterpillar in a tree that is providing you no nutrition all winter long? Most insects overwinter as eggs or as pupae or chrysalids and sometimes as adults, but not as larvae. Well, these are exceptions, and again, the leading hypothesis is that it puts them in a really good position when those leaves actually do break bud and burst out. Those caterpillars that are usually 3/4 grown are right there, ready to go, and they can complete their development very fast. If they overwintered as an adult or an egg or a pupa, they're way behind in that regard. So an interesting phenomenon that most people have not noticed. Okay, February is the quietest time of year for oak, so it's a good time for us to look at some of the oak landscaping myths that are out there. Of course, myths are usually based, at least in part, on some factual material. So here are things that people talk about all the time, excuses why they should not plant oaks. And one of them is they're too expensive, they grow too slowly, they're too big to use on a small lot. If you do use them, they'll fall over and crush your house, or they'll lift up your sidewalk or your driveway. All reasons that people give me not to use oaks. So let's look at each one and see whether they are true or not. Are oaks too expensive? Well, they are too expensive if you insist on planting large oaks, if you insist on getting instant gratification. When you plant a large oak, and they are for sale, because the nurserymen get to charge you a lot when you buy a large tree. If they're grown in a pot, they undoubtedly will be root bound. So root bound condition, of course, is when the roots just go around and around that pot. And if the tree isn't dead when you buy it, and I assume it wouldn't be, it will be shortly thereafter, because as the roots grow, they strangle each other. So usually 4 or 5 years after you plant the tree, it actually dies. Never buy a big tree in a pot. The other alternative is a bald or burlap tree, and that's not root bound, it's rootless. Those roots have been pruned to the point where most of the major roots that support this large tree are gone. And once you put it in the ground, if it doesn't die outright, it's going to sit there for a decade or more trying to rebuild the root systems that were chopped off in order to transplant it. If I plant an acorn the same day I plant one of these trees, and these can cost $3,000, by the way, so it's not cheap. This acorn will sprout and grow, and in a decade it will be bigger and far healthier than that tree you spent a lot of money on. So it takes a little bit of patience in the beginning. They do grow slowly in the beginning, but then they take off, and you will have a far healthier tree. So delay that instant gratification. This is an ideal size to buy an oak. Of course, a lot of people don't like to sell oaks that size because they can't charge you very much. So it's a good time to plant your oaks yourselves. Get an acorn, then it's absolutely free, and you get a nice healthy tree. Do oaks grow too slowly? I hear this all the time. Not going to plant an oak because I won't live long enough to enjoy it. Well, oaks, if they have to be 400 years old before you enjoy it, you're right, you won't live long enough. But they don't grow all that slowly. Let's have a race here between my little friend Bella, who is not my daughter. Everybody thinks she's my daughter. We watched Bella a lot when she was young, and she's 2 years old here. We're gonna have a race between Bella and the oak that we planted in our yard here. That's the one I planted from an acorn. It is 6 years old here. So who's gonna grow faster? Well, here the tree is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Bella's losing. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. There's 2020. Bella's got her mask on, so we don't forget what year it is. Bella has clearly lost the race. She is not going to win. Bella's tall. She is taller than me at this point. Again, this is not through growing by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not really the slow poke that everybody thinks of. And this is a white oak, which they really have a reputation of being really slow growing plants. They are not. But you don't have to wait at all for your oaks to contribute ecologically to your local food web. And that's That's why I'm planting them. Oaks are the major contributors of energy to your local food web. They're supporting more types of wildlife than any other type of tree. This is a pin oak that has just popped its head above the leaves at our house. And here's a caterpillar standing on the ground eating the leaves of that tree. So they are contributing energy to the food web the very first year of their life. And that's what it's all about. Do oaks get too large to use in small yards? Well, you're never going to find a landscape designer that suggests you use a large oak in a yard this size. I guess there weren't any landscape designers 100 years ago when they built this house and put these trees in. I pass this on the way to the University of Delaware every day when I drive in. Big trees on a small lot. So for 100 years or more, they have shaded that house and dropped the temperature by at least 10 degrees in the summertime. They've protected it from the wind in the wintertime. They have not fallen over and crushed it. But again, nobody's going to recommend you do that. All I'm saying is that it can happen. Here's an even larger oak next to a very large church. I don't know the history of this planting, but they didn't chop it down when they built the church. And the tree's very happy about that. But here it is, with almost no ground at all, doing really well on a street corner in Chestertown, Maryland. But the point I want to make is that there are a lot of oaks that are small enough that they can be used either as street trees or in small yards. In the east, we've got the dwarf chestnut oak. A little bit farther south, the Georgia oak, which has been in the trade occasionally. Blue jack and blackjack oaks, runner oaks, dwarf live oaks. The great live oaks of the south, there's actually a dwarf variety. Myrtle oak, Chapman oak. These are all options in the east that we need to make more numerous in the trade. And in the West, we have even more options. There are oaks in the West that are actually ground covers. So if we get these things in the trade, we can use oaks, get all those ecological attributes from oaks, even when they're not very large trees. Here's the dwarf chestnut oak that we have in our yard. Made acorns when it was 5 feet tall. Perfect for a small yard. Here's another option for getting small oaks in your yard, and that is to create a coppice situation. Coppicing is when you take a tree and you chop it down with maybe 4 or 5 inch diameter, and then it grows up from the base as a shrub, as a bush. It comes up with lots of different stalks. Coppicing was a very common forestry technique in the old days. They used those stems for lots of things. I just don't know what. I don't know why everybody coppiced, but they did. They coppiced a lot of trees. But it's a mechanism for getting a tree like this. This is I don't know if it's a scarlet oak or red oak, into a small space. You coppice it maybe once every 5-10 years, and it never gets big, but you're providing a lot of valuable oak foliage to your yard. Something we ought to try. Will oaks crush your house? Well, we read on the paper and we see in the news all the time. Anytime any storm comes through anywhere in the country, we hear about how terrible it is when the trees fall and everything. So, and trees do fall. I mean, let's face it. But they fall because of the way we plant them. We want every tree to be a specimen tree. We don't want it to be near any other tree so that it competes with it for light or nutrients. We want it to be able to spread out in all directions. So everything's a specimen tree, which means the roots never get to form a matrix, a stabilizing matrix with other trees. And then when you get a lot of rain and a wind, over they go. This is the way trees grow in a forest. They stabilize each other. The roots are interlocked, and it's very difficult to blow these guys over. A tornado will snap them off. And there's nothing you're going to do to protect yourself from a tornado. But if we planted our trees in little groves instead of as specimens, they would be a lot more stable. This is a stream cut that illustrates how trees grow in nature. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 different trees here. All their roots are locked together. They are not going to blow over. So instead of this, we should consider groves like this. So these are 2 white oaks that seeded in naturally before they put this road in. That's 3 feet separating those trees there. Their roots are thoroughly locked together. Neither one of them is as big and splendid as it would be alone, but you view them together as a collection. This is called the Three Sisters in Northwest Connecticut. So you see this in nature all the time, where trees are growing closely together, their roots are all locked in. You can do this in planned plantings as well. This is one of the DuPont estates. at Mount Cuba Center in Hockessin, Delaware. There's a big red oak back here, but you've got hemlocks in front of it. You've got rhododendrons down here, hardscape down here. This was planted in the 30s, but it creates almost a forest type situation. It's a grove that is very attractive, and you're viewing it as a unit. But those trees are not going to blow over. So we should do a lot more than that, a lot more of that. Will your oaks lift up your hardscape? Well, they can. It depends on what you're planting them on. I mean, if you're planting them on bedrock, there's no place for the roots to go, so they go laterally. But they don't, if there's good deep soil, they can easily go underneath the hardscape. Here are two big red oaks at the University of Delaware. I mean, look at the size of that tree next to the curb. It does not lift it up because there's enough room for them to get under there. If you're planting your oak on an agricultural pan, a pan is when the plows went down a certain depth for 100 years and just compacted the soil underneath the plow, rock hard. The roots will run along the top of that pan. So if you're planting where you have an agricultural pan, get that pickaxe down there and break it up, and then the roots will penetrate. But it is not at all a given that large oaks are going to lift up your hardscape. Okay, we're now into March. This is when those marcescent leaves are finally starting to drop. They're landing on the ground. So let's talk about oak leaf litter. A single large oak can produce 700,000 leaves each year, which if you put them next to each other would cover 4 tennis courts. There's a tremendous amount of variation in the size and shape of oak leaves. Some of them just like oak leaves, but some of them look like holly leaves or willow leaves. So that's willow oak. This is the emery oak from the west. The white oak group has rounded edges. The red oak group has pointy edges. But there's a tremendous amount of variation, even within a tree. The juvenile leaves are much bigger than the adult leaves. When these leaves fall, though, they are performing a really important ecological function, and that is to put a blanket over our extremely valuable soil. There are more species in the soil, and certainly more individuals in the soil than there are above ground. But they all need to be protected in an area with high humidity. By the way, while we're looking at this, a lot of people think I have to rake away all my oak leaves from my beds because my plants won't be able to get through. Well, here's a natural planting of ferns that easily get through the oak leaf litter that nobody has removed ever. And I'm doing a little experiment with phlox at home to see whether or not natural amounts of oak leaf litter will inhibit the health and well-being of those phlox plants. And so far they don't. Now, if you pile up 5 feet of oak leaves, yes, they're going to squash whatever is there. But the point is those oak leaves are protecting the soil and the soil organisms. There are tremendous numbers of organisms in our soil, 250,000 mites per square meter, 100,000 springtails. This is a spinthurid springtail, the little columbolins. 90,000 proturans per square meter. Proturan is a very primitive insect, little white thing. You really need a microscope to see it. 1 million nematodes. That's a lot of life under there, but all of them require high humidity. When you remove the leaf litter, the soil dries out and these guys all disappear. The soil erodes, the soil bakes under the sun and gets way too hot to support these guys. And I'm not even talking about the fungal mycorrhizal associations that are vital for our root systems. So that's the function of leaf litter. They protect all of these guys from those raw conditions. And leaf litter, of course, contains the nutrients that tree used the previous year, and then they drop to the ground. And all of these guys are detritivores. They're breaking down those leaves and returning the nutrients to the soil. So it becomes a steady state system where you never have to fertilize. If you remove your leaves every year, you're removing the nutrients that your tree depends on. And if you do that every single year without fertilizing, and it's very difficult to put the right amount of fertilizer down, you're really hurting the health of the tree. There are a number of butterflies that depend on oaks, primarily the dead oak leaf litter. Believe it or not, the banded hair streak is one of them. The larva eats oak leaves when they're dead on the ground. Very tough to find those caterpillars. But there are also 70 species of moths. We call them litter moths that again develop on dead leaves. Things like the ambiguous litter moth, the American idea, the dark spotted palthus, and 67 other species are down there in the leaf litter. So when you rake up the leaf litter and throw it away, you're throwing away the food. You're for all these moths, which are important parts of the food web. You're throwing away the blanket that protects the soil. You're throwing away the nutrients that those trees need. Then you've got all of the predators that eat all of those guys, like the many species of ground beetles, the spiders, and all of those other guys. So leaf litter is important. We've got to keep it around. Okay, April, that is the month that the oak leaves bud. The buds burst forth. We start the new year of life. It's also the time that you get a chance to witness one of the most ephemeral interactions in all of nature, and that is when cynipid gall wasps lay their eggs in the meristematic tissue, the buds of the oaks, to form galls. And that's what you're looking at right here. This is a female cynipid gall wasp. That is her ovipositor. She's laying an egg in this oak bud. This is a male cynipid who has already mated with her. He hasn't gone away though, because he doesn't want him to mate with her. She will, after she lays an egg, she will mate again. And he wants to be the last guy to mate with her before she lays another egg. So there's something called sperm precedence in many insects, where the last male in is the one whose sperm is used. So he's mate guarding. This guy's just hopeful, and he's not going to win. What she does when she oviposits, she's laying her egg in the bud, is to inject an egg, but she also injects plant hormones that manipulate the growth of the cells. These are just like stem cells. They can go into any shape, do anything. She's manipulating that with plant hormones. The oak is also manipulating the growth, and the combination of those manipulations creates a species-specific shape that we call a gall. So here's a female. She's laying an egg in this bud, and that is the gall that resulted from her oviposition, because I tagged it and watched it develop. But some galls are quite pretty. They can be quite numerous. A single oak tree can support 70 species of gallers. There are 5,000 species of cynipid gallers on oaks around the world. So it's quite a large and varied community. I don't like the analogy where people say galls are like cancerous growths. Cancerous growths are uncontrolled growth. I mean, they just keep growing. Galls are highly controlled growth. And you can recognize the species of galler by the type of gall that it makes. Another feature of galls is that most of them are essentially hollow. This is the apple oak gall. It's one of our largest galls in the East. And if you cut it open, you'll see it's hollow. There is a central sphere here, which is actually very hard. And inside that sphere is where the larval cynipid wasp is. But what's all this space about? Why is it a big thing with emptiness in there? Well, it also turns out that cynipid gallers have more natural enemies, more parasitoids, usually other wasps that try to develop inside the cynipid galler. This is the ovipositor. Where's my pointer? Right there, of this pterimid wasp. If you rear out wasps from galls, you put the gall in a jar and just see who comes out. It's often these guys. It's often the parasitoid that will come out rather than the cynipid itself. There are more species of parasitoids attacking cynipids than any other type of cynipids are attacked by more species than any other type of insect. So they have to protect themselves. And that's one of the features of the gall itself. What they do is the gall grows really quickly, and they've got to get that space between where the galler is and the outside of the gall beyond the length of this ovipositor as fast as possible. And once that space exceeds the length of the ovipositors of the enemies, then it's safe. But while it's growing there, that's when these guys have access to it. So there's a very brief period of vulnerability, but after that, they are safe. So that explains that big space in those galls. Gall variety is fantastic. A lot of them look like plant diseases, but these are actually, each one of those is a type of galler. There are 536 species of plant galls west of the Rockies, just west of the Rockies, and most of those are cynipid galls on oaks. So many galls form on the leaves themselves. Others form on the stems. Some of them look like little brains, I guess. I don't know, just pretty decorations. Here's one that really looks like a disease, but it's not. It's a number of different galls. This one looks like pottery. There's a real brain for you. This is one of the big galls on Quercus garryana, the Oregon oak or Oregon white oak. It's very common in the West. These holes are what happens once the galler emerges from the gall. Galls also have an interesting effect, or have had an interesting effect on human history, in that they have provided the ink that we wrote down most of our history with. And this is the gall that did it. Here's the hole where the galler has emerged. But if you grind this guy up and add certain chemicals, it turns into a black ink. And for thousands of years during our written history, that is the ink we used to record that history. So the Bible was written with oak gall ink. The Magna Carta was written with oak gall ink. The Declaration of Independence, all of what the scribes were writing during the Middle Ages, all from gall ink. Just a little history tidbit there. Once those marcescent leaves drop from the tree, then you have the opportunity of seeing whether or not your tree is hosting any Polyphemus moth cocoons. They're quite large, they're silvery, they're easy to spot. They're hard to spot when the leaves are all surrounding them, but in April they drop and you can see them. That's what the caterpillar looks like. It's one of the giant silk moths, and that's what the adult looks like. It's our second biggest giant silk moth. Unfortunately, like the other giant silk moths, these are in the family Saturniidae. They're all getting fewer and fewer in numbers. Many of them are already extirpated from New England. So if you have a Polyphemus moth on your oak tree, it's kind of a special thing. A great way to get your kids interested in insect, by the way, is to start playing with the large Saturniid moths. May is when the new biological year really springs forth. Lots of things are happening in May, starting with the expansion of those leaves. So all of those buds break and the leaves rapidly expand. Following that expansion comes all the caterpillars that eat those leaves. And following all those caterpillars, of course, are the birds that eat the caterpillars. Spring migration. So not just our resident birds, but all of the migrants are moving through right on the heels of the emergence of all of those caterpillars. This, by the way, is one of the problems with climate change. It's decoupling the bud break and the presence of those caterpillars and when the migrants move through. They're getting asynchronized. So the migrants either come too soon or too late, or the caterpillars come too soon or too late. And the whole system that worked very well for eons is now threatened because of climate change. But birders know, if you want to find warblers, you go to oaks. And we've actually documented that. Christy Beal was a student a number of years ago who measured warbler migration, warbler foraging on various tree families. So this is the Fagaceae, this first one here. Here are pines and here are birches and so on, in cemeteries where they had large planned plantings. The Fagaceae that she looked at, Fagaceae include the oaks, the beeches, and the chestnuts. Well, there weren't any beeches or chestnuts in her study site. So these are all oaks, and it documents the amount of minutes that migrating warblers spent foraging on these different tree families. So you can see where they're spending all their time. They're spending their time on oaks. And they're spending their time on oaks because that's where the food is. They're there to eat the caterpillars that are on these trees. And there are a lot of caterpillars on oaks. Things like the purple-crested slug, the buck moth, the white-marked tussock moth, the saddled prominent, double-lined prominent, white-dotted prominent, the checkered fringe prominent, the laugher, the lace-cap caterpillar, the two-spotted oak punky, the skiff moth, the white-blotched heterocampa, the oblique heterocampa, the variable oak leaf caterpillar, the banded tussock moth, the hickory tussock moth, the red-lined panapoda, the yellow-neck caterpillar, the smaller parasa, the unicorn caterpillar, the crown slug. They're called slug caterpillars because the head is tucked underneath. They're not really slugs. The streaked dagger moth, the epilated dagger moth, the lesser oak dagger moth, the greater oak dagger moth, the afflicted dagger moth, the red-humped oakworm, the orange-humped oakworm, the pink-striped oakworm, the confused wood grain, the spiny oak slug, and my favorite, the spun glass slug caterpillar. I think it's the prettiest one in the country. And literally hundreds more species of primarily moths are found on oaks, not just in the spring, but all season long. This is what our house looks like today. We put an awful lot of plants back We do have some lawn. We're very traditional here. But about 4 years ago, I decided to try to get a picture of every species of moth that is using our yard. And I am up to 1,136 species that I've photographed in my yard so far. The point I want to make is that almost 30% of those are there because of the oaks that we have put in our yard. That makes oaks a primary contributor of all of these moth species to the food web. These moths are transferring more energy from plants to other animals than any other type of plant eater. They are essential components of food webs. And you can measure the quality of your food web simply by counting the number of species of moths that you are supporting. And that's why I call oaks keystone species. Remember what a keystone is. There's the Roman arch. The keystone is the stone in the middle of that arch. And if you take that stone out of the arch collapses. Well, I call oaks keystone plants because they're part of just 5% of our plants that are making 75% of the caterpillar food that drives those food webs. 14% of our native plants are supporting 90% of the caterpillar food that drives those food webs. In 84% of the counties in which they occur, oaks are the #1 keystone plant that is out there. In the mid-Atlantic states, and that of course includes New York, they're supporting 557 species of caterpillars. Tulip trees, just for comparison, support 21. Ginkgos support 0. So big difference among the trees we put in our yards. Nationwide, they support at least 950 species. That's actually 952 at this point. There is no other tree genus that comes close to that in their ability to support the caterpillars that drive our food webs. So people ask me, which oaks are best? Which ones are supporting the most insects? And my answer is they're all good. So compared to other tree oaks are all really, really good. But I did have a student this summer who compared oak or herbivory on, actually it was 16 species of oaks. You don't have all 16 here. And there is some variation. White oaks were the best, but just marginally. A whole bunch of oaks are very, very similarly high in terms of the amount of insects they support. The 3 that are the lowest down here are the ones that are out of range of where they evolved. So this is the Chinese oak, Quercus acutissima. I'm a little surprised at the amount of damage that it had on its leaves. But it turns out that was from Japanese beetles that really seemed to like it at one site. And of course, they're not native either. This is the water oak and willow oak, which they're at their northern natural range here. I know if we plant them, they will survive, but they have, they're beyond the reach of the species that typically use them. So they're not supporting very much up here. But when people say, which oak should I use? I say, don't worry about supporting the wildlife. They are all going to do that. Pick an oak which is going to be most suited for your soil type, your altitude, and do the best you can to dodge the diseases we brought in for oaks. Right now, the red oak group in much of the mid-Atlantic is getting clobbered by bacterial leaf scorch. I'm losing several trees at my house because of bacterial leaf scorch. So if I were to plant a new oak here today, I would pick one of the members of the white oak group that do not get bacterial leaf scorch. But if you move a little farther west, the white oak group is suffering from oak wilt that we've brought in. And if you move all the way to California, you've got sudden oak death syndrome. So we've brought in a number of diseases that are really challenging our oaks. Do your best to find out what's present in your area and plant the oaks that are least susceptible to those. Why do we need all these caterpillars, by the way? I keep talking about them being important parts of the food web. Let's just talk about what they do for birds. Birds rear their young on caterpillars. That's what it boils down to. A chickadee requires 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars just to get the birds to the point where they leave the nest. And then they continue to feed them caterpillars another 21 days after they fledge. And they are not exceptions. 96% of our terrestrial birds rear their young on insects, and most of those insects are caterpillars, and oaks are making most of the caterpillars. So if you want birds, you need oaks. You need the trees that are going to be very productive that are out there. Now, there's a lot of other things that eat those caterpillars as well, but people like birds, so that's what I focus on. Okay, June this year, of course, was the month of the cicada, the periodical cicadas. That's when the 17-year brood emerged at our house. I don't think they made it up to New York City, but there's also the 13-year brood, which is a little farther south. It's an exciting time for entomologists anyway, but the news media, of course, went crazy. They called it a terrible scourge and we should all be afraid and it's going to be too loud. We'll go crazy. We'll kill our children. And, you know, the news media, they want to demonize nature every chance they get for some reason. I guess it attracts viewers that way. It's not an invasion. These guys have always been here, by the way. What it really is one of the most fantastic biological events that you're ever going to have the privileged opportunity to witness. So they came out this year at my house. I'm going to be 87 next time they come out. So I really wanted to enjoy them this year. It was a good emergence this year. I mean, they came out in numbers. This is a picture from one of the trees at the University of Delaware. They leave holes in the ground when they come out. These are emergence holes, which aerates the soil really well once every 17 years. It's a very healthy thing for the tree roots that are down there. But they were here in numbers. And we had an interesting phenomenon in Newark, Delaware, where 11 Mississippi kites came in, took up residence for about 2 weeks, and flew around and ate those cicadas, as many as they could. Otherwise, we don't see Mississippi kites. That was a special event if you were a birder. So this is what happens. They come out at night, and this is what the last instar nymph looks like. They come out at night because there's a lot of things that want to eat them, so they try to do it in the secret of the night. Then they split their back skin and drop down, swing up and grab a hold of the head there, and then hang from it. And we call it tanning. They're hardening their exoskeleton. Right now, it's very soft and pliable, like a soft-shelled crab. Well, these are soft-shelled cicadas, and they can't do anything until they tan up that exoskeleton. Once they're tanned and hard, then they can fly away and start their life. And when they fly away, it's the male that sings, and he goes over and over and over again. Can get a little repetitive, but what he's doing is calling in a female. And the reason the male is singing and not the female is because it takes a lot of energy to sing. There's a resonance chamber in his thorax, and he's got muscles that are moving part of his exoskeleton back and forth in a clicking sound, just like a clicking of a Coke can back and forth, but it does it 1,000 times in a second or something like that. And it causes a buzzing sound. The louder he is, the more attractive he is to a female, because loudness represents health and size, and females are looking for the best males. Then the females come in, they find that best male, they mate, and then the female lays her eggs. Here's her ovipositor. She is jamming it into sticks, into stems, typically oaks. They really like oaks. Here she's jammed it all the way in there, and what she's going to do is lay an egg. And after she lays the egg, she does it sequentially right down the stem, deposits an egg into the stem. And that often causes what we call flagging. It kills the stem from the point of oviposition on out. So you get these dead branches on the trees, and that upsets a lot of people too. Oh, they're going to kill my tree. No, they're not. They're just pruning it. This is called nature's pruners. Even small trees survive this. So, we just want our things to be perfect all the time. This is part of nature. Then those eggs hatch, the little guys fall to the ground, tunnel underground, and then develop on the tree roots. Where are they laying their eggs? Well, another student this summer looked at flagging on different tree species in Newark, Delaware. The greens here are the species of oaks. And look, oaks were favored over all the other trees that the cicadas were ovipositing on. So again, oaks are favored because they're going to hatch out and then develop on oak roots. And then they die. That's it. That's it for their life for another 17 years. Why do they spend 17 years underground? Well, it's the same reasoning as we have for acorns. It's predator satiation. First of all, they spend 17 years underground, which means no predator can track that. You can't wait 17 years to have your first meal. So then they emerge in such high numbers that there are no predators around, things like squirrels that love to eat them, but there's never enough of them. The cicadas easily swamp the predator population. That's predator satiation, and they get to live out their life. July. That is the month that the night chorus starts, and oaks are important in terms of supporting those singing insects. I'm talking about katydids, and this is a true story, by the way. Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Katy who fell in love with a handsome young man. Alas, he did not share her feelings, and he married another. Soon thereafter, he and his young bride were found poisoned in their bed. Who perpetrated the crime was never determined, but some say the insects in the trees were watching that night, and each summer they solved the mystery by singing, "Katydid, Katydid." Now, if you've ever been in the woods, anywhere in the East, you've heard that sound. I did a lot of camping when I was young. It used to sing me to sleep. It's a very, a lot of nostalgia associated with that sound. But that's the males again singing to each other. The females are seeking out the largest male. So that's very common among the Orthoptera, and the katydids are one of the orthopterans. This is a female katydid in the 5th instar. She's not an adult yet, but she's got her big spatula-shaped ovipositor already. Her wings aren't fully developed, and here they are. Now she's in a full adult. She's going to lay her eggs with this spatula after she mates, and those eggs are large and flat, and she glues them to stems. So if you ever see this type of these structures on a branch, those are katydid eggs. These have already hatched, but they stay glued there for months. The katydids will sing starting in July right through August. I mean, there are a few katydids singing even right now into October, depending on how cold it gets at night. Okay, August. August is a time that is really, it's a tough time for all those caterpillars that are on oaks, because oaks, one of their major types of defense is leaf toughness. You know that through the months, the tender leaves of the spring become harder and harder and denser. They're full of tannins, full of lignins. They kind of become like boards, and they're very difficult to eat. So most of the caterpillars that are around in August can eat oak leaves using 2 different mechanisms to get past that leaf toughness. One is gregarious feeding. This is the yellowneck caterpillar. They all feed as a group, and apparently enough mouths together can get through that tough leaf tissue. Here they are when they're a little bit bigger, but they're eating together, which means they can strip a branch of its leaves. And it's a very common mechanism for caterpillars on oaks. Excuse me, this is the orange humped oakworm, the pink striped oakworm. So a lot of them are doing this. Just before I took this picture, I counted 115 yellowneck caterpillars on the lower branches of my tree here. But can you see any of those yellowneck caterpillars? No. Can you see the branch that they have stripped? No. But if I knocked on your door and said, you got 115 yellowneck caterpillars on your tree, call the man, get the spray can. Everybody would want to make sure they kill it to save the tree. Don't do that. This is part of what the tree does. It's sharing the energy it has captured from the sun so that we have birds and other things around there. If our plants didn't share that energy, we would have no animals on planet Earth. It's not going to hurt the tree. Oaks have evolved to be able to withstand that type of herbivory. A woman in New Orleans, Tammany Baumgarten, suggests that we all practice the 10-step program. Take 10 steps back from your trees and all of your insect problems disappear. And I think that's really good advice. This is the distance at which we view our trees. If you go up and you inspect each leaf, yes, there's a little bit eaten out of each leaf, but we don't see that at a decent spacing. Another mechanism is to become a leaf miner. You avoid the tough outer layers of the leaf, and you only eat the soft, spongy mesophyll or palisade parenchymal cells. And that's where the nutrition is. But in order to do that, you got to be really thin and really small. And that's what leaf miners are. This is where the egg was laid, the caterpillar hatched out, and it formed a serpentine mine, looks like a snake. This black line in the middle here is its frass. That's its poops that it made as it ate part of this leaf, and then it pupated here and then exited from the leaf. This is a blotch mine, so they kind of eat in a circle. There's the caterpillar right there. There it is, backlit. You can see it eating away. And here it is, a really good picture taken by Salvador Vitanza to show you what a leaf mining caterpillar looks like. Different from most other caterpillars. But the adult is not different from moths. It comes out looking just like a regular moth. It's small. This is one of the Chamameria species that attacks oaks. The solitary oak leaf miner, gregarious oak leaf miner, oak tentiform leaf miner. There are a number of species of tiny moths that are leaf miners on oak because that's a mechanism for getting past that leaf toughness. August is also a time when it's a really dangerous period to be a caterpillar on an oak because the natural enemies populations have built up to the point where they're nailing almost every single one of those caterpillars. This is a yellow striped oakworm that has just been stung by this potter wasp. It's going to fly off and carry that potter wasp to its little mud pot and stuff it in there and then lay an egg on it. Now this guy is paralyzed. He is not dead. If the wasp had killed it, it would rot before the egg even hatched. So this is a form of refrigeration. This is how these wasps keep the meat for their babies fresh, just as if it were in a refrigerator. They paralyze these caterpillars so that they're alive, they don't die. And then when the egg hatches, it eats the caterpillar alive. It's kind of gruesome, but they don't have refrigerators, so it works. These are the eggs of the yellow neck caterpillar. They're laid gregariously all together. And minutes after they are laid, a tiny little inserted wasp, a little parasitoid, shows up and it's going to lay its own eggs in the eggs of this wasp or this caterpillar. And here they are emerging. So you can see that a number of these eggs were parasitized by that one little wasp. And it cuts down the number of things that are eating our oaks. This is called natural enemy control. When you spray your tree, you kill all these guys. And then you run into problems. You get an insecticide treadmill. This is a tachinid fly. It's another major group of natural enemies of the caterpillars that are out there. There are thousands of species of tachinids. And what they do is they lay an egg on the outside of a caterpillar. This is a saddleback caterpillar that has a tachinid egg on it. Here's a tachinid that has already hatched and tunneled into the caterpillar. That's its breathing tube right there. So it's in the process of eating the insides of this guy. And here's a little pteromalid wasp, which is laying an egg in the saddleback caterpillar. So this caterpillar is dead 3 times over. It's never going to make it to adulthood. It is extremely hard to find and rear out a caterpillar in August that has not been parasitized like this. This is a contracted Daytona that's got 4 tachinid eggs on its head capsule. 3 of them haven't hatched yet. This one has hatched and is already tunneled into the caterpillar. It's not going to make it. This is a black blotched Caesura caterpillar, which has figured out how to fool the tachinid. It has 3 white markings on its rear end that look exactly like tachinid eggs. So the fly comes along and says, whoa, somebody's already laid an egg here. So I can't do it now because I'm behind the 8 ball. And it gets to protect itself with that defensive mimicry. Another way to protect yourself is to simply roll off the leaf and hang from a silken thread. There is a thread there. We can't see it right now. And you hang there until the natural enemy has disappeared. But there are braconid wasps that have figured out what's going on here, and they'll actually pull up the thread hand over hand with their front legs until the caterpillar is up top, and then they'll lay an egg in it. Or they shinny down the silken line until they get to the caterpillar and they lay an egg in it. So it is tough to be a caterpillar in August. Okay, September, this is the peak season for crickets. We all know about crickets. We think they're, most of them are black guys crawling on the ground singing. And that's right, most of them are black guys crawling on the ground singing, but there's a couple of species that are bush or tree crickets that are yellow or green. And some of them are up in oak trees. Well, of course, they're singing at night, but they're doing the same thing that the katydids are doing and that the cicadas are doing. They're trying, these are male singing, trying to attract a female. So these guys are a little smarter about it. They use the architecture of the leaf to enhance their sound. They find a hole in the leaf. Then they put their head through the hole, lift their wings, and they sing. The leaf is often in the shape of a parabola, and they can project their sound out farther and louder than if they were singing on a flat surface. So what they're doing is sending a deceptive message to the females that are out there. The message is, I'm a big male and I can sing really loud. They're not a big male, but they are a smart male, and maybe that's good enough for a female. Some species actually chew a hole in the leaf of the right size, and then they use the hole that they chew. You can go out and find this on your oaks without a lot of trouble. It's also a good time to find walking sticks. Walking sticks are called walking sticks because they look like sticks and they walk. This is a picture of a walking stick that I took on an emery oak in Arizona. Notice how the leaves look just like holly leaves out there. You usually don't see walking sticks. They're up in the canopy most of the summer. You don't see them until September, sometimes even October when they start to come down. But they can be very common in oak forests. There are records of walking sticks defoliating oak forests in West Virginia. I've never seen that. Usually they're not all that common, but they're a curious type of insect that you can find on your oaks. All right, we have walked through the entire year. So let me wrap up by reminding you what you already know. And that is that we humans have created a very serious biodiversity crisis on this planet. You hear all the time about how our birds are disappearing, our insects are disappearing. They're not disappearing. We're killing them. There's no mystery here. We're killing our birds. We're killing our insects. Earth is now experiencing the 6th great extinction event in its history, but it's the first one that's caused by another organism, and that is us. So it's a global crisis, but it has a grassroots solution. Grassroots solution means it involves everybody. We all have to pitch together to solve this, and we can do that. There are 4 things that every landscape has to accomplish ecologically if it's going to contribute to its local ecosystem, and we need to start doing that. All those landscapes have to capture carbon. They have to manage the watershed. They have to support a diverse community of pollinators, and they have to support a complex food web. By the way, when I talk about food webs, I'm talking about the diversity of animals that are out there running the ecosystems that support us. It's not optional to get rid of the natural systems that support us. We have to have them. So when you, as a private citizen, plant an oak, you are accomplishing 3 of those 4 ecological goals. Oaks are capturing more carbon than almost any other tree that's out there. In terms of total carbon for size, oaks are always number 1. They're managing the watershed in a better way because of their huge root system. They're supporting a more complex food web because of all the species of animals that they support. The only thing oaks don't do better than other plants is support a diverse community of pollinators, and that's because they are wind pollinated. But 3 out of 4 is pretty good. Despite all of their wonderful landscape attributes, though, oaks are now in trouble. The old giants in our forests are gone for the most part. There's a few here and there, but they used to be everywhere, performing unique ecological services. They're gone because we've harvested them and we cut them down. The oak wood is certainly great. We have cut the percentage of oaks in our eastern forests in half in the last 100 years. And we've done that by introducing diseases, by high grade harvesting. In other words, we only take the best trees and leave all the others. And so we've wiped out the oaks by lumbering. And we've eliminated burning as a management tool. In the East, burning used to favor the distribution of oaks, and now we've eliminated it since Europeans came, and that favors cherries and maples. And we've introduced a whole slew of diseases that are hammering our oaks, including invasive insects like the gypsy moth that has hammered our oaks. So our oaks are in trouble in our forests. There are 28 species of North American oaks that are threatened. 1/3 of our global oaks are endangered at this point because many of them have very small distributions. And when humans are everywhere, we just simply wipe them out. The Oregon white oak, for example, it used to be distributed from mid California all the way up through Washington state. It's lost 97% of its range to agriculture. I've got grandkids in Portland, Oregon. And there are big Oregon white oaks there as landscape trees here and there. And this is a mast year for them. They're producing acorns everywhere. And not one of those acorns is going to turn into a new tree because there's 0 recruitment just by the way we manage our landscapes. There are 2,300 species of both plants and animals that rely on oaks in Great Britain. And they're all threatened because of the loss of oaks in Great Britain. In France, They are rebuilding the roof of Notre Dame Cathedral, and they're doing it with oaks, 6,000 large oaks cut down in France to rebuild that one roof. And that's just about all that is left. So, you know, the Notre Dame Cathedral roof is important, but so are our oaks. Of course, we humans live our lives during a very brief instant of ecological time, and we can't return our ancient oaks to our landscape during that short instant. But we can start the process. And in no time at all, the oaks that you plant today will be large enough to assume most of the really important ecological roles in the landscapes that they need to be playing. We are all responsible for good earth stewardship. We need to be responsible for it. And I say that because every single person on the planet requires a healthy ecosystem. So in my mind, that means everybody has a responsibility for good earth stewardship. Nobody gets a pass on this. And the best way to exercise your responsibility is to embrace the power of oaks. So for the sake of our turkeys, our chickadees, our woodpeckers, our warblers, our jays, our thrushes, our emeralds, our prominents, our gallers, our weevils, our orthopterans, plant an oak, plant a living community, plant the future. Thanks very much.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much, Doug. The pictures alone, when you were going through all of the different caterpillars, I'm gonna need to go replay that to look at all of those a little longer because those were really nice.
They're my friend.
And so let's see, we'll go, I think there's one question that's in the chat, and then anybody else who wants to, you can, if you want to do a little raise hand or whatever, we can go around. One question that got asked earlier from Don Reckley's are any comments about, ooh, I just got rid, it just went out. Any comments about oak leaf litter and Asian crazy worms?
Yeah, I have one positive comment about that. Those Asian crazy worms, there's 3 species that have been introduced. You know, we introduced a lot of species of worms from Europe hundreds of years ago, but they played pretty nice. They actually enhance the quality of our soils. They aerate them. But these worms from China do not play nice. They eat all of the leaf litter. They change the soil chemistry. They eat all of the seeds that are in the soil. And you end up with the soil, which is really just a pile of worm castings that doesn't retain the moisture. The leaf litter is gone, so it erodes. It's a serious ecological problem where these worms have invaded. But there's good evidence that, at least for those 3 species, they're pretty small and they don't seem to like oak leaf litter. So when you have a good oak forest with a lot of leaf litter, you don't get the invasion of those worms. Now I'm getting this from the worm specialists, and there's not many of them because they're so hard to work with that have observed this. I am getting emails from people saying, oh, I've got those worms even though I got oaks. So, you know, who knows? I don't have any of the worms and I can't test it directly, but you know, the oak leaves are large and very tough, and I can see that those worms would not be able to eat them. So that's one positive thing.
Great. All right. All right. We have a comment from Ellie that says, could you discuss the development and longevity of acorns?
Well, the red oak group takes 18 months to develop. The white oak group develops in a year. White oak group germinates in the fall. The red oak group germinates in the spring. So if you want to plant a member of the red oak group, you can collect the acorn in the fall. And I would suggest you do that because something's going to eat it over the winter time. Put it in some peat moss in a Ziploc bag in your refrigerator, and then take it out in the spring and plant it then. And I would suggest putting it in a pot until it germinates, let it get going, and then you plant that. Because when you just put them out in the landscape, usually the rodents, something gets it most of the time. I wanted to get post oaks on my property. I planted 100 post oak acorns and I came up with 0 because the mice got every single one of them. So I tend to put things in pots these days to get them going. Is that what you were after with that question?
Yes, thank you.
What I have on a follow-up for that is how long can an acorn last out in the forest before it kind of is no longer viable?
Well, again, the red oak acorns last all winter, no problem. They're not going to germinate until the spring. The big issue is all those things that want to eat them. It's a very valuable food source. So they never get the chance to see how long they will last before they're eaten. The only ones that escape are the ones that, get buried under leaf litter and something can't find them. But they don't have a period of dormancy, like a black cherry seed. You bury a black cherry seeds, they're finding seeds in New York City that have been buried for 100 years and they germinate. That's not going to happen with an oak. They're going to want to germinate within a year, either the just days after they fall from the white oak group or the following spring with the red oak group.
Great. All right. The next one that we have is from Rebecca McMacken. She says, I've seen trees planted closely together do terrible over time, ending up with 2 half trees rather than well entwined trees, but perhaps it's far different for acorns rather than those from nurseries.
Okay. I guess that, there's so many conditions that go into it. What kind of soil you're planting them in and how close are they really? When I say plant an oak grove, I'm thinking of, 10-foot centers maybe, and maybe 3 trees, not more than that. Yes, they are going to compete. They're not going to be as large, but you see it all the time in the forest where there are large trees that had the opportunity. They'll spread their roots out in other directions. So it's not like they're competing with hundreds of other trees that are that close as well. But look at a forest. It's doing pretty well. So it doesn't cut down everything to little half trees.
All right, we've got now another question from Ellie. If you have any comments on varieties of Quercus palustris, such as the Pringreen green pillar that is said to be a faster grower than the regular species.
Yeah, we haven't looked at any of the cultivars of oaks. Quercus palustris it's the oak of the swamp, and yet we're planting it on street corners all the time. So you've heard of right plant, right place. I'm not sure I would pick an oak that is adapted to having wet feet for a city tree. Yet we do it all the time, and then we wonder why they get stressed. Somebody suggested to me, blanking out right now who it was, that we look for the genotypes that are good for our city conditions. So for example, red maples, that's also a tree of swampy areas. But if I drive through the Pennsylvania mountains and look at a rock outcrop, I can find red maples growing straight out of the rocks. And those are genotypes that are adapted to do that. We should take them, call them red maple street corner or something. And those are the ones we should put in our cities. They will do much better than ones that really do want to be in lowland wet areas. And that's probably something that's going to happen with the pin oaks as well. But in my opinion, we overplant pin oaks because it's just one of the things in the market. We buy what's available. We need to get more species available. We need to test them under different circumstances and see which ones are going to do best in our very stressful city conditions. And
there's another thing that might be a kind of a follow-up related to that from Daniel about oaks and drought.
This year in the far west, Portland, Oregon again, I know back as we were just there visiting our grandkids, it got up to 115 degrees. So it's normally droughty in the summertime, but just hotter than they've ever been before, just terribly, terribly hot. And we went there and they've got a lot of Mediterranean plants everywhere. Half of them were dead. The other half were withered with the tops burned off. A lot of their trees were stressed or dying. The Quercus garryana, the Oregon white oak looked great. It handled that without any trouble at all. And I was really pleased to see that. So that's anecdotal. And we don't get those conditions here in the East. Where I live, we haven't had a drought since 2005. I know just north of us and in Connecticut, they had some serious droughts, but oaks are usually really good at handling droughts. The problem with drought in New England this past couple of years is that it triggers the outbreak of gypsy moth. When you have dry springs, the gypsy moth tends to go crazy. What controls gypsy moth in a normal year is dampness that allows a fungus to outbreak. And you had several springs in a row that were really droughty. The oaks did fine, but the gypsy moth came out and then clobbered them that way. So that's more of an issue than the drought itself. You know, drought depends on the depth of the soil, the amount of soil moisture that's down there. But things like white oaks and chestnut oaks in particular are really good on rocky outcrops, but they're growing in very little soil. So if you get a serious drought when there's very little soil, it's going to be hard on any plant. It's a function of the soil conditions rather than the tree itself.
All right, we've got lots of questions coming in here. Another one we have from Kevin, he says, normally non-native trees do not have the same insect and bird activity as natives. I noticed the turkey oaks have a lot of bird activity in May. Do insects not care about non-natives?
The turkey oaks are native. Does he mean?
Here, Kevin, if you want to.
Sagittarius from the sawtooth oak, that's from China. Turkey oak, the southern, that's the southern red oak.
I think it's turkey from the country of Turkey, no?
No. No, I think it looks like the foot of a turkey. That's why it's called the turkey oak.
So the turkey oaks in Central Park are native trees?
Okay, so you're saying Quercus sericea. This is a common name problem here. We've got two species of native trees called turkey oaks, and this one you're showing me must be from Turkey itself. I know nothing about that.
But they were from the country of Turkey.
Okay, well maybe that species is. It's not our turkey oaks. And you say they're getting good insect damage?
Oh, for like a 2-week period, they're the best trees in the park in terms of bird activity.
Okay, well let me talk generally about close relatives. That's a congener of an important native genus, Quercus. And if the leaf chemistry of these non-native congeners is so close to our natives, then our insects won't know the difference. We did a congeneric comparison for 18 different genera of plants where we grew them in a common garden. Oaks were not part of that because it was only a 2-year grant. We didn't have enough time for that. But when we averaged out the response of insects to these congeners, on average, it reduced insect use by 65%. Not always. So things like willows, the weeping willow had just about the same amount of activity as black willow. Crab apples were just about the same as our native crab apples. So maybe this would have been a case if we had used this turkey oak, it would have been very similar. I know that the Chinese oak, the Quercus acutissima, is not as good. So it varies, but that would be the explanation, is that it's so closely related that the leaf chemistry, insects are going by chemistry. They don't know where it came from, but they do know what it tastes like and what it smells like. So I am guessing that the turkey oak from Turkey is very similar to at least one of the species that we have here. It'd be interesting to test it out. I'd also love to see exactly what was eating it. So that's my student who said, "Oh, there's a lot of damage on the Chinese oak." We looked what it was. It was Japanese beetles. That doesn't count because those guys are from Asia as well. But if the birds are there, they're not eating Japanese beetles. So that had to be caterpillars, and that's a good indication that it is fitting in.
Nice. All right, we're gonna try to get in 1 or 2 more here. From Jen says, any recommendations for how to keep some leaf litter for habitat while working in public New York City parks?
It's a cultural issue. We tell the people who manage the park to leave it there. We need to create beds. One thing I didn't talk about was creating beds under our trees. We want, these caterpillars are vital to our ecosystem, but they develop as caterpillars in the tree, and then they drop from the tree to pupate in the leaf litter under the tree, or they tunnel into the soil underneath the tree. And when we have lawn or bare soil, under that tree, it's very difficult for them to get under, and there's nothing for them to spin their cocoons in. So having beds under our trees is a great way to reduce the area we have in the lawn, which we want to do because we've got 40 million acres of lawn, the size of New England. If you plant ground covers, wild ginger or mayaples or any of the other ground covers that are there under those trees, the tree likes it better. And it's a much healthier situation, both for the caterpillars and all those soil organisms. And that's where you put the leaf litter. But if we have this idea that's got to be lawn right up to the tree and you got to get rid of all the leaves or they mess up the lawn, that's where we run into trouble. So it's a matter of changing the cultural requirements under those trees.
All right, and then we have a question from Jill, who says, I have become aware of 8 different species of oaks growing together on the coastline in Pelham Bay Park. Is there a reason that oak diversity might be higher on the coast?
Well, a lot of oaks do really well in sandy soil. So they're, when we talk about pine barrens that go from Massachusetts all the way down to Florida, pine barrens, a feature of pine barrens is a number of oak species. So they're not called oak barrens, but they could be called oak barrens. They just, it's one of those drought things. They do really well in really well drained soil, which is sandy soil. So it's an adaptation that fits the physiological makeup of oaks.
And that also answers then, there was a question a little earlier if you would talk about Quercus marylandica. So that would be one that's in the pine barrens with that sandy soil.
Yep.
All right, and then we have one last question that says, I know you're from Cynthia, I know your talk is focused on oaks, but are you aware of any treatment of beech leaf disease nematodes that are attacking American and European beech up in Westchester County?
No. Yeah, I'm not. I would happily share it with you if I were. So these are nematodes that are attacking our beeches. I know we got beech blight. I haven't heard about nematodes. How'd they get here?
There's always something new.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know anything about it. I'll have to look it up. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, this was a really great talk, and we did record it, so it'll be up on the YouTube page soon. If you guys want to look at anything again from there, or we can, if you have any questions you want to ask Doug, we can put, you want to put your email into the chat, that would be great. But otherwise, then we're finished up, and no community board meeting tonight, and keep an eye out for our next month talk when we'll have it scheduled. We'll send out a registration link for that. So everybody have a great night.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.